Were the Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, I know Americans don't care about WhatsApp, outages a result of something strange, a conspiracy due to the whistleblower revelations? Is it evidence that you can't have ongoing monopolies? You can't put that much power in one centralized place, or it's risky? Or is it just a coincidence and a tech issue? Let's have a look at it.
Tonight, major outages affecting billions of users of Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. All of it starting this morning and continuing through the day. All of the sites owned by Facebook.
Is that a former Facebook employee turned whistleblower testified in front of Congress to reveal what anybody with an ounce of common sense knew literally over a decade ago, that social media is bad for children to be using.
I believe Facebook's products harm children, stoke division, and weaken our democracy. The company's leadership knows how to make Facebook and Instagram safer, but won't make the necessary changes because they have put their astronomical profits before people. Congressional action is needed. They won't solve this crisis without your help.
Wait, I know how we can solve this. Just like children aren't allowed to buy cigarettes, alcohol, or guns, maybe you should be 18 years old before you're allowed to have a social media account, or at least be able to post on social media.
But it turns out this tight-lipped individual, to me, seems like a fraud. It seems like a plant. It seems like a pro-censorship shill that is getting promoted by mainstream media.
And this week, the so-called Facebook whistleblower burst onto the scene with a similar agenda: censorship. Frances Haugen, a Democrat donor who was responsible for blacking out the Hunter Biden laptop story at Facebook, mysteriously retained an Obama lawyer, appeared on 60 Minutes, and coincidentally testified on Capitol Hill the very next day. She testified that Facebook's tearing the country apart and contributes to violence. Oh, and she happens to be speaking to the January 6th committee.
Yes. Frances Haugen, she testified before Congress yesterday. Here's the thing. Strongly advocating for increased government control over Facebook. What exactly makes her a whistleblower? Well, we have this. She filed for whistleblower protection status under the SEC. Okay. But let's be clear here. There are a few things that you need to know. She absolutely has a bias. And here for Facebook, she was a director of data product at Gigster, where she raised concerns that the AI's objectivity might be not transparent, that it might be racist.
It's the best photo of her.
Yes. But you remember how people complained that emojis were racist? Remember how people complained that face recognition software was racist? And we just said, come on now. Well, she was one of those people. So the people who you say are not mainstream, far-left social justice warriors who say that everything is racist, this is what she has done her whole life. Again, beware the Trojan horse. Bill Burton, an Obama era deputy press secretary, he's actually consulting with her legal communications team, just to be clear. So the direct tie, this is an overlay D with the communications team.
Probably the only thing that Republicans and Democrats can agree on these days is that social media is terrible for children. But that's just the candy coating on the supposed whistleblower's mission. Her real goal is to censor more free speech from us adults.
The reality is that we've seen from repeated documents within my disclosures is that Facebook's AI systems only catch a very tiny minority of offending content. And best case scenario, in the case of something like hate speech, at most they will ever get 10 to 20%.
Of course, her definition of hate speech is accurately calling Black Lives Matter a violent extremist movement or a Marxist uprising, or mocking anybody who can't figure out what pronoun they want people to call them, or having anything negative to say whatsoever about a certain little country in the Middle East. Real Facebook whistleblowers like Ryan Hartwig, Cassandra Spencer, and Zach McElroy, who have revealed how the bias algorithms suppress conservative content and censor free speech, are all but ignored by the mainstream media.
If you're able to manipulate people's moods, manage people's moods up or down, that's a level of social control that, you know, I guess you sort of think of as being in the realm of sci-fi, and you don't notice it in plain sight, because I suppose we have so many competing influences. And I guess where you've got to start, though it be anecdotally, is with your own life. And how much of your time are you staring at a screen? How many of your emotions have been elicited by something you've seen on a screen? How many times have you been made angry or fearful or ashamed because of something you've read on a screen? And the idea that there might be an economic imperative behind the emotions that you, fellow human, are feeling, for me, is a sort of a cause of some concern. And anyone that attempts to sort of centralise that power and shut down any opposition to it, I think is doubling down on a type of digital tyranny. That's just my opinion, of course.
A company with such frightening influence over so many people, over their deepest thoughts, feelings, and behavior, needs real oversight. Today, Facebook shapes our perception of the world by choosing the information we see. Even those who don't use Facebook are impacted by the majority who do.
That's interesting. It's so pervasive that it doesn't even matter if you're not on it. Like, you're still going to be affected by the cultural attitudes that it engenders.
Facebook will tell you privacy means they can't give you data. This is not true. Not only does the company hide most of its own data, my disclosure has proved that when Facebook is directly asked questions as important as, how do you impact the health and safety of our children, they choose to mislead and misdirect.
I'm still trying to break it down, you know, because I still, obviously, I'm a person that's on Facebook, my content's on Facebook, you know, I'm a person who's reliant on social media for business, like I'm sure many of you are, for communication and business, and you feel like, well, what actually is happening? Is there something nefarious? Is it the management of information?
And this is something else. They didn't talk about Section 230. We've been talking about this on this show. Section 230 is a protection that's afforded to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. What does it mean? It's very simple. Let me say, if you're talking on Verizon or AT&T, even if you're a Nazi talking about how you hate people of different races, which is horrible, it's abhorrent, but the fact is they don't have the right to remove your cell service or stop your call. That's the same protection afforded to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, because they're not liable for any comments or any content on that. That's not the same for the New York Times, Washington Post, because these are considered publishers. However, Facebook, when you clearly see they remove a sitting president, or Twitter removing a sitting president, and YouTube, by the way, you think that all happens at once by coincidence? Let's just be real. You don't think there was a meeting somewhere down the line that they remove him all within 24 hours of each other, and you still have the leaders of ISIS and Hamas out there, for crying out loud? If we can't find common ground on the fact that people who throw gays off of rooftops are worse than the president of the United States, who gave an award to Boy George, then there's no common ground.
I want people to be careful about, you know, getting in, you know, on this person's side, because it's very questionable. So there were 9 horrifying facts from Facebook whistleblower's new 60 Minutes interview. Now, if this person was a whistleblower and they were really plugged in on everything, why are they doing an interview on 60 Minutes? You can see there's a lot of questionable things brought to the light by Jack Posobiec. Facebook, quote, whistleblower is clearly a left-wing activist for government censorship. You can see Facebook encourages hate speech for profit, says whistleblower. The whistleblower made numerous bombshell allegations on 60 Minutes. You can see this person here. Frances Haugen is an advocate for public oversight of social media. Public oversight means government oversight of social media. They've also put this. Frances says the intersection of product management and gender. Frances shares strategies for navigating the hidden pitfalls of product management and gender at GitHub Girl Geek Dinner on August 19th. So again, this person is like a pro-censorship shill. Facebook whistleblower says she wanted to fix the company, not harm it. I don't exactly buy this.
Firstly, Edward Snowden, talking about the outages, said Facebook, WhatsApp and Instagram all going down at the exact same time sure seems like an easily understandable and publicly popular example of why breaking up a certain monopoly into at least 3 pieces might not be a bad idea. So let's see whether or not we believe, you believe, I believe, all of us believe that it's possible that these outages are in any way connected to recent events. And even if they're not connected to these Facebook whistleblower events, you should hear this stuff because someone has taken a very, very brave stand. It's not easy to talk out against power. This always happens. It's very difficult to control or prevent that from happening. As I hope you know by now, I'm not advocating for some sort of Stalinist 20th century style communism. I'm talking about decentralized power, regulation, the prohibition of these sort of colonialist, imperialist projects that may start, who knows, with like the ingenuity of 1 or 2 or 5 people, but end up as diminished. There's no point going, oh, well, it just happened. Look what's happening now. Look what's happening now. As long as the incentive is make as much money as possible, as long as that's like a credos that cannot be challenged, and like no, you can't argue with that. That's what has to happen. Shareholders, that's how our system functions. Gotta. This is the results. This is how it behaves. This is how it behaves. It's not doing something wrong. It's doing what it's designed to do.
The testimony was entirely about teenage suicide. It was things to pull on your heartstrings. And look, that is a problem, just to be clear.
Right, they were talking about girls, right, committing suicide.
Well, this is also a problem.
Never mind, not a problem.
They were talking about teenage girls committing suicide. And I understand, of course, I have a daughter now.
Yeah.
We do not want to see a company disregarding their involvement in an increase in suicide.
Right.
But why talk about girls? Here's something people don't know. Boys commit suicide at 4 times the rate of girls. Wow. And there is, that very same data reflects that there's an increase in young male suicide. Why does that not matter? By the way, how do you think young males are going to react? When it's just, well, yeah, you commit suicide already at 4 times the rate, but that's not really pandemic status. And yeah, you know what, the exact argument we're making, that this is increasing teen suicide with girls. Let's just talk about girls committing suicide and conservative hate speech. You are going to have the pendulum's going to swing the other way. Yeah. They're going to feel isolated. They're going to feel, you know what people have to do when they don't feel heard? They have to scream. They have to become violent. We don't want that.
No, absolutely not. And honestly, the reason that they're talking about girls is because, frankly, it pulls on the heartstrings more to say girls are committing suicide because of all the images that they're seeing that they can't live up to. And Instagram and Facebook are just pushing those things. By the way, this is the same Facebook and Twitter that removed the absolutely true Hunter Biden story that was not Russian disinformation prior to an election. I'm just going to go back to that. I'm going to keep hitting that because if you're saying that you're a platform and not a publisher, then you leave that story up and you let people go in and debunk it, right?
Of course.
But that's not what happened.
Yeah, but now we're supposed to believe that all of these same people, of course, are being 100% transparent and truthful on issues like COVID, on issues like election integrity, right? These are the same people who allowed a disinformation. They used to say a Russian disinformation campaign about Trump. No, the disinformation campaign was that there was Russian collusion with Donald Trump. Right. That was allowed to flourish everywhere. Everywhere. And by the way, was the crux of why we needed to secure our election integrity from Elizabeth Warren, from Bernie Sanders, from Amy Klobuchar. They said these elections are not secure, and it was based upon a lie, the Russian collusion hoax, the Russian remember the term Russian interference? Interference in what? Our elections. And instead, they allow that story to flourish. Before the election, they get rid of the Hunter Biden laptop story, which, by the way, is not just about Hunter Biden, but about his dad and their ties, not only with foreign, but also China, if you actually understand the story. We know it's true. They've acknowledged that it was true. Now, just like our Oscar stream, just like our election stream, you don't get it back. You don't get those votes back. You don't get that truth back when it needed to be out there. And now we're supposed to believe that, of course, they are beyond fault when it comes to discussing the election and COVID now.
We're supposed to trust big tech or Don Lemon to tell us what the facts are? The guy who pushed the Russia hoax? There was no consequences for that. Democrats can't control the narrative if people are allowed to speak freely on social media, so they're trying to end that. This is the perfect storm, created to give Democrats a chance to regulate our speech and give the legacy media power over social media.
Public oversight. This feels like an op. And it's getting branded like she's some brave soldier. But what this is mainstream media just attaching their already insane push for censorship to a private citizen because they think that will work. You can see even right now, it's still hashtag delete Facebook trending on Twitter. I don't know if I clicked on this last night, but like, I don't get it. You see here, this clip gives it away. Miss Haugen says she joined Facebook because she had lost a friend to conspiracy theories, and that Facebook's decision to recognize/disband their civic integrity, quote-unquote censorship, unit where she worked resulted in everything that happened back in January the 6th. Are you joking? This is a total op, in my opinion. She's just parroting the normal mainstream media pro-censorship opinions. Don't be fooled by this.
During my time at Facebook, I came to realize a devastating truth. Almost no one outside of Facebook knows what happens inside of Facebook. The company intentionally hides vital information from the public, from the US government, and from governments around the world. The documents I have provided to Congress prove that Facebook has repeatedly misled the public about what its own research reveals about the safety of children.
I tell you what, props to this woman doing this, man, because last week I had one article written about me saying I was a fan of Donald Trump, and another one saying I was a voice for anti-vax people. I nearly went and lived in a hole. I'm going, right, I'm moving into a hole. That's enough of this. And then I realised, no, just keep pure-hearted, tell the truth. You have to tell the truth. People will be all right. People will come together if you're continually honest and you tell the truth. I'm a flawed, fallible human being. I ain't perfect. I don't pretend to be. I don't pretend to understand everything. But what I do claim, and it's a claim that many news organisations cannot make, is that I want to tell you the truth. And I respect you. And I respect your opinion. And I respect your right to be you. And I respect your right to disagree with me.
The efficacy of its artificial intelligence systems and its role in spreading divisive and extreme messages. Facebook wants to trick you into thinking that privacy protections or changes to Section 230 alone will be sufficient. While important, these will not get to the core of the issue, which is that no one truly understands the destructive choices made by Facebook except Facebook.
It points to like a fundamental thing that Facebook can't share that information, because if it shared that information, it would mean it would be exposed to regulatory forces that it wouldn't want to deal with. It shows you also that the American government, powerful set of institutions, though that is, are not sufficiently powerful, or at least not empowered to confront Facebook, precisely because however things are now, and I'm not attacking the constitution of your wonderful nation, but where we find ourselves now is these sort of things, the corporate world and the governmental space are interwoven. The government, if it comes to the crunch about will the government stand up to giants on behalf of the people, the answer is no. It is not set up to do that. It will not do that.
I posted a video showing Kyle Rittenhouse helping an injured protester in Kenosha, showing that he didn't show up with any malicious intent and that he had actually helped put out a fire, a literal dumpster fire that the Black Lives Matter terrorists had started. Facebook took that video down and then gave me a strike on my page for violating their PRS policy, their praise, represent, or support policy of what they've deemed a dangerous individual. Of course, you didn't hear a peep about this from any conservative social media influencer, political pundit, or reporter, because, well, I'm not Conservative Inc. approved. No Republican member of Congress denounced Facebook for censoring evidence showing Kyle Rittenhouse in a positive light, in a true light. This new whistleblower who's getting loving praise from the liberal media and Democrats in Congress can be summed up with this meme. Hello, my fellow whistleblowers. Facebook and Instagram aren't censoring enough memes. Instagram took down this Scooby-Doo meme last year of Jussie Smollett being exposed, saying that it was harassment. I was bullying a poor celebrity. Thank God Facebook fact-checked that Martin Luther King in a MAGA hat meme that I posted. And that's not a joke, by the way. They really did fact-check this. Facebook's algorithms are so strict to prevent people from posting thought crime that they once literally, and this is not a joke, they censored somebody posting the Declaration of Independence because it contains a negative word about Indians. Oh, I'm sorry, Native Americans. The Declaration of Independence was censored by Facebook and deemed hate speech. As you know, everything that hurts liberals' feelings, or that is funny, or even crime statistics about certain racial communities that make them look bad, is deemed hate speech by the big tech companies.
Yep. CNN cut away during this.
They have giant nipples. Really?
Ted Cruz, too. This is something they didn't cover in the media. I'm sure they went back to the COVID death ticker.
Yeah.
Cut away during Ted Cruz's questioning. So here's something, again, it's what the media doesn't talk about, that you missed.
Do you know if Facebook, any of the research it conducted, attempted to quantify how many teenage girls may have taken their lives because of Facebook's products?
I am not aware of that research.
Nope, that's wrong. Facebook has known anti-suicide algorithms, and they have reporting on this. In other words, if this was important to her, she would have those numbers. Yeah. Also, if you don't have those numbers, how do you say there's an X time, an X multiple, or X percent increase in suicides?
Yeah.
I don't have those numbers. You know that you're in front of a senator. Like, if you're not going to prepare,
You know they likely get these questions in advance, right?
It's the only reason you're here.
What's the linchpin of your argument? You're basically saying that Facebook knows. Then you're like, hey, have they done any research on this so that you can prove that they know? I don't.
Just like, just trust me.
I don't know about that.
What are you blowing the whistle on?
Yeah.
I guess nothing.
I don't have the data on that.
I don't know.
I assume they know. I mean,
I thought. You mean you don't know, Ted?
You had the information.
I was told, how are we going to do this? Is this the Abbott and Costello?
Ted, I was hoping you would read the number and I would go, that sounds about right.
Yes.
And during this distraction all week, YouTube and Google announced they won't let anybody that doesn't believe in climate change make money on their sites. Free thinkers, scientists, scholars, citizens can't earn a living on YouTube and Google by asking questions about science. Isn't that the entire point of science? The scientific method? To ask questions and use reason to deduce the truth? But you can't profit from seeking the truth there anymore.
You can see 60 Minutes decided that an earth-shattering scoop that they found a Facebook, quote, whistleblower who complains that Facebook is not censoring enough. That's what this is. And all of the same media outlets, Gizmodo, which is a left-leaning media outlet, Ars Technica, these places are all parroting like bombshell. Ooh, we got Zuckerberg, get Zuck. I really just care about the people. No, you're a shill. This is, in my opinion, fake news wrapped up as a whistleblower or advocacy or activism. This is truly shocking, and people are running with this. It's like, how many normies are out there? 9 horrifying facts from the Facebook whistleblower's new 60-minute interview. Why were they getting interviewed on 60 Minutes? They're part of the machine. Oh, wait a minute. She was promoting the exact same opinion that 60 Minutes has? Oh, what a coincidence. Last week, the Wall Street Journal published an internal research from Facebook showing that its social media site knows precisely how toxic its own product is for the people who use it. Duh, everybody knows that. But tonight we learned how the journal obtained these documents. A whistleblower who spoke with 60 Minutes about the ways Facebook is poisoning society. The 37-year-old whistleblower liberated tens of thousands of pages of documents from Facebook and even plans to testify to Congress at some point this week with the same far left pro-censorship talking points that we're already hearing from the very same people who are promoting this. Fundamentally, she claims there's a key conflict between what's good for Facebook and what's good for society at large. No kidding. Are you going to pretend that you didn't know that toxicity is what makes these platforms grow? It's not just Facebook, my child. It's Twitter. It's every single social media. For the overwhelming majority, it is toxicity that drives everything.
We have, in a sense, got to stop looking at individuals within systems and start looking at systems themselves. Without an alteration, fundamental alteration to systems, we can see where they will lead. It doesn't matter who you pick out or put in, put this person in, take this person out, put a female one in, put a male one in, different colours. It's the system is the thing. If that doesn't change, you're just dancing around, mucking around with wallpaper.
As long as Facebook is operating in the shadows, hiding its research from public scrutiny, it is unaccountable. Until the incentives change, Facebook will not change. Left alone, Facebook will continue to make choices that go against the common good.
Now, at this point, the whistleblower's claims, whilst based on documentary evidence, are of course not proven, and presumably this congressional hearing is in order to ascertain the validity of these claims. However, what no one can dispute is that Facebook has unprecedented power. I suppose what we're dealing with these tech giants has no obvious comparison other than the industrial giants of a century ago.
This is something, too, they didn't talk about, whitelisting. And this is, again, we've had other whistleblowers. This is where Facebook allows popular leftist accounts, right, to just flagrantly disregard the rules, while, of course, they hold other accounts to the closest scrutiny or make up new rules, like with Donald Trump. We've had this on our Facebook page. We've talked about this. The Facebook page was throttled. It's considered misinformation or, potentially damaging information, I believe, even though the information was not incorrect. It was quoting the CDC. The very same thing, by the way, has happened with YouTube. While we're talking about speaking before, a Senate hearing, I think we have a clip of Ted Cruz talking about that. Why wasn't this being discussed from a whistleblower?
And I recount that because the YouTube CEO sat in my office and she admitted Steven Crowder didn't violate any YouTube policies whatsoever. He was entirely consistent with their terms of service. But they nonetheless demonetized him anyway, simply shut off his ability to earn any revenue. And by the way, this is how the man earns his living. Demonetize. I ask everyone here to think how they would feel if some massive corporation demonetized you, just zeroed out your bank account. That is an incredible power.
Well, Susan Wojcicki was in his office talking about me?
What?
You have to tell me about this shit.
This whistleblower is simply an indictment against mainstream media as well. Look, you want to stop using Facebook? Go right ahead. I'm not going to die on that hill. It's, to me, it's how, people stay together or, stay in touch, but it also is negative. I think people spend entirely too much time on social media, and that includes YouTube, where you may be watching this video. I enjoy that you choose to spend your time with me during the day, and I hope that you'll subscribe to the channel. But I also am trying to grow in my content and try to be a little less divisive, or point out where I think something is just being divisive for that sake. Facebook dissolved its civic integrity unit after the election, which is what it was intended to do, right? It was intended to work to maintain the election's integrity. Once said election was over, there was no point for it to exist anymore. Facebook's algorithm intentionally shows users things to make them angry, to make them interact. Now, anger is one thing that gets people to interact. So is like cat videos. She explained how Facebook's algorithm chooses content that's likely to make us angry because that causes the most engagement. Everybody already knew that. And user engagement is what Facebook turns in ad dollars. And again, everybody knew that. Its own research is showing that content that is hateful, that is divisive, that is polarizing, it's easier to inspire people to anger than it is to other emotions. Facebook has realized that if they change the algorithm to be safer, people will spend less time on the site, they'll click less ads, they'll make less money. Again, how is this different than what Vice does?
See what's happening here? Total setup, just like Christine Blasey Ford, just like the Ukraine whistleblower. Democrats in the media are conspiring with her so they can sink their hooks into big tech and have total control of the information flow. CNN's Don Lemon laid it out perfectly.
It allows lies to be spread unchecked. So if we say something on this network that is not true, there are repercussions and ramifications, right? We face the consequences. If you do that on social media, there are no consequences. What we post on social media, what is posted on social media, should be true.
So
and if it's not true, it should be taken. Take it down. If it's not true, take it down. If it's not true, don't allow people to put it up there. Have them face consequences.
Facebook has not earned our blind faith. Today, no regulator has a menu of solutions for how to fix Facebook because Facebook didn't want them to know enough about what's causing the problems.
I suppose what it is, this is the problem with an algorithm, and I would argue materialistic rationalism more broadly. If you calculate everything along the lines of an economic imperative, you start to miss things like freedom, liberty, individual human emotions. If you're just looking at, oh, these images are doing well, or this has a good impact, these posts are effective, oh, these people spend more time online when they do this, this and this, all things that you can understand and see what the reasoning would be. I'm not suggesting that these organisations are peopled by inhuman monsters. I recognise that, people that are working at Facebook, they're human beings. Like, we're working, right now in a sort of a tech world on various social media platforms, and whenever I speak to human beings that work at those places, beautiful human beings. This is just an advance of the ideologies, the free market, late capitalist, or corporatism, a lot of you like, because I check what you say in the comments, corporatist ideas that dominate our time, which do not allow for complex reason, open-minded. We've got to stay focused, we've got to stay attention to stuff like this going on.
Facebook wants you to believe that the problems we're talking about are unsolvable. They want you to believe in false choices. They want you to believe that you must choose between a Facebook full of divisive and extreme content or losing one of the most important values our country was founded upon, free speech.
That's a very interesting part of the conversation, that free speech increasingly has become something that's sort of taboo to talk about, that's anti-free speech squared, isn't it? What do you mean free speech? Why are you talking about free speech? Are you a racist? No, what I mean by free speech is people are allowed to communicate freely and openly in a public sphere and disagree with one another. Let's not pretend that the dominant influence in this conversation isn't a financial, economic, profit-driven one. It's nothing about liberty, except as liberty pertains to those prevailing ideologies.
By the way, lest you forget, our entire 2020 election stream was removed from Facebook. Gone. No reason, still, to this day. No reason given. Look, here's the thing. There are a lot of conservatives who have a victim complex and a persecution complex every time a tweet gets removed. When they say that we haven't broken any rules, but they create a new rule, which in the industry is known, colloquialism, as the Crowder rule that stings.
When you see something like Ted Cruz saying that about you, this is just a side thing. Does that blow your mind?
Yeah, well, it really blew my mind when it was Senator Hirono saying, "You are allowing the hate speech of Steven Crowder."
Yeah.
Like, can someone please throw her out the window?
What is the Crowder rule here, right? That he says something truthful that you just happen
They
not
create
to like?
another category. They used to have community guideline rules at YouTube and then advertiser-friendly guidelines.
And then Crowder guidelines.
And then they have borderline guidelines.
Okay.
And some would argue that the Vox Adpocalypse, if you remember that happened. Alphabet stock took a nosedive because it affected not only us as creators. Then they came out and they had to say, well, actually, no rules were really broken. So they created a new set of rules that are entirely arbitrary and allow them to say, there's nothing inaccurate, there's nothing hateful, we're going to consider it borderline and just harm you anyways. Here's a video of Seth Meyers because no one watches it unless we force you to.
That's more offensive than anything you've ever said.
Yes,
Seth Meyers is autoplayed. But by the way, Facebook took down the largest live stream of the election, right? I think our numbers were just out of this world crazy. And it's like, oh, we can just stop that, right? You made a great point. Even if they put it right back up, you don't get those views back. People don't typically come back in. And they did it on the Oscar live stream when we were obviously doing parody.
Yeah.
Right? And it was fair use. They did it. They took it down. We don't get it back. So that's the game they play.
Like, they basically said, oh, good, we made it through the election. There were no riots. We can get rid of the civic integrity now. Fast forward a couple of months, and we got the insurrection. Anybody who calls it that, you can just assume is a crazy person. Facebook only identifies a tiny fraction of the hate and misinformation on the platform. Again, the very same people who are constantly preaching about misinformation, I think it's good that we're worried about misinformation, okay? I really do. But I want you, next time somebody talks about misinformation, ask them what they define as that. Because in my experience, it's more often information they don't like than actual misinformation. 13.5% of teens say Instagram makes thoughts of hurting themselves worse, and 17% say it's making their eating disorders worse. Okay, so these are people in the age of where they still have parents. So listen, parents, get your kids off social media.
Costume on the cover of this month's magazine, that's hate speech. Criticizing child drag queens, or particularly their parents, with language harsher than, I disagree with that, is hate speech. Are you starting to notice things about virtually every commercial on television these days? Better not say anything other than praise about it, or else that's hate speech. The wrong facial expression can also be hate speech as well. That's nonverbal hate speech, or face crime. But the Marxists don't just want free speech banned from social media, they also want certain books banned as well.
Just last week, YouTube said they were removing any misinformation tied to COVID vaccines, including videos from Dr. Joseph Mercola. As I mentioned, he's been silenced on YouTube. His lies and false propaganda are still available on other sites, of course, including the largest bookseller in the world, Amazon. The question is why?
Continually, we're sold the idea that the problems that we face in our society are the result of our own darkness, our own prejudices, our own bigotry and tendency towards conflict, when increasingly what it looks like now is that these deep human emotions are managed, manipulated, dragged to the surface by organisations with this level of power in order to create conflict, so we stay on their platforms for longer and so that we are in conflict with one another. A situation that I can see being beneficial to governments and various other authorities, because a people divided cannot ever confront the problems it truly needs to confront. If you walk down the street and you meet 10 people and one of them's a Republican, one of them's a Democrat, one of them's a Hindu, one of them's a Muslim, who gives a shit? You're just walking down the street, all right, mate, all right, how's it going? Yeah, all right, all right. You know, but if continually you're schooled in this person's against you, they're trying to take from you, continually, look, they disagree with this. You're in this heightened, unreal state of conflict. These are real hormonal, biochemical energies being stirred by masterful tech manipulators. Don't take responsibility. Don't take the blame that you're a bad person with prejudicial views. Normally, people will get along with each other just fine. The idea that we need all these centralized forces governing us, certainly very convenient for these centralized forces, isn't it? Well, we're only here because you need us to be here. Without us and us, you'd just be in disarray. We'll be fine. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And they need more power. They need more power to censor more people like this.
That's exactly what this whistleblower is calling for.
Exactly.
She's calling for more power for these companies to censor points of view. I don't want to attribute motive, but if you really care about suicide, how about you talk about the young boys who are committing suicide at 4 times the rate?
Right.
Do you know what else, too? You're not allowed to speak out against transitioning trans children on Facebook and Instagram. Guess how many of the kids, if they are not put on puberty blockers, grow out of saying that they're trans, which, by the way, has a 42% attempted suicide rate pre- and post-transition.
Yeah.
98%, close to 100%, right? They grow out of it. Guess how many grow out of it once you put them on puberty blockers? 0. So if you want to prevent those suicides, how about allowing people to say, you know what, let's not start transitioning children and conducting this experiment because we know it leads to record levels of suicide, but that's not allowed either. The point is, this isn't about the betterment of society. This isn't about trans kids. This isn't about suicide. When you listen to the testimony, I highly recommend that you watch them. All of the discussion is about consolidating more power to the tech oligarchy. So we need to do away with this myth that we have common ground. We do not. The only common ground that we have is Facebook bad, big tech bad. Everything outside of that is them saying big tech bad because we think they're allowing too much freedom.
Yeah, exactly. The foot in the door is worrying about suicide.
Right.
And the rest of it is hate speech, which is undefined, and violent speech, which, again, is undefined.
Yeah.
Their incentives are to make money, not to police the content that people put. But that's not what this whistleblower wants. Take a look at who's propping up this whistleblower. Okay? And then ask yourself if you really think this person is interested in blowing the whistle on Facebook or just furthering the existing pro-censorship, anti-free speech that we're already hearing from the far left. You know, and ask yourself if you think this person is a plant, because in my opinion, this person is definitely just a political ideologue who wants more censorship, and everyone's pretending that there's some sort of bold, brave hero. They're no hero. If it's on CNN's front page like it is right now, that just speaks volumes as to whose side she's on.
Well, Hogan is a hero. It's as plain as day, isn't it? Although I'm sure some people say, she's doing this to get her own TV show. I don't know. Looking at this person, I think this is a person who's taking a risk for their values that we need to promote, ideas that we need to share, a conversation that we need to have.
But we must act now. I'm asking you, our elected representatives, to act.
Another wrinkle to this is that the fact is it's difficult to regulate Facebook if the regulatory bodies are peopled with or relate to former Facebook employees. For example, it emerged recently that a top Democrat tech staffer has left Capitol Hill to lobby for Facebook. John Branscombe, who I'm sure is a decent guy, has spent more than a decade working for the Senate Commerce Committee, one of the leading congressional panels taking aim at the power of tech giants, and will join Facebook's federal policy team next month. So when you hear like that's a real life example of a human being that worked at Capitol Hill in the tech area, now is working at Facebook. Like, we lose ourselves in branding and logos. We're meant to. You're meant to see a logo and that logo provoke a potentially positive response that's emotional rather than rational. But behind these words, Facebook, Senate, government, are human beings and human relationships, limited, prohibited and controlled, in my view, by systemic requirement, but nonetheless having human interrelationships. This dude is going to be talking to people he used to work with, doing stuff that's related to his current job, connected to his old job. Oh, you'll find that bit of regulation, I'm an expert in that because I helped pass that. Yeah, I'm just using this as an example of something that is much more broadly understood to be a systemic problem. The revolving door between Washington and Wall Street, or Silicon Valley and Washington, or in my country, the city and government. The problem of lobbying is one that makes a mockery of democracy. The centralized power of tech giants, or the, I would say, unresponsive, undemocratic power of governments, is a massive problem. And this little story, even though it begins from a crazy little moment where all of us are like, what's wrong with my phone? Why can't I talk to people whenever I want? Even though this whole shit didn't exist like 10 years ago. I can't cope without this. This is useless. Damn you. You know, it all starts with something trivial that we all experienced.